I love looking back at the licensed games that were released right at the end of a console's life. These are the games that few people got to play because they didn't sell well or they had limited print runs. People have already moved on to the next console, the next big thing, and a lot of these games just get forgotten about. But these are the games that really pushed the system. The developers are taking everything that they've learned over the years and squeezing everything they can out of a console. So in my Last Days of series, I'm looking back at these Twilight games. Now, these aren't the games that killed a console, they're just the ones that gently laid it to rest. The ones that were released in those last days. And today, we're looking at the original Game Boy. I'll do another one on the Game Boy Color a little later. Now, I love my NES, I love my Super Nintendo, but it was the Game Boy, I think, that was my absolute favorite. Probably like many of you, I didn't have a TV in my room when I was growing up. But with my Game Boy, I could play anywhere, anytime. I didn't need a TV. I even had one of those stupid lights that plugged into the side, like the green little worm lights, so I could play at night. Now, the Game Boy Color improved on the original Game Boy in nearly every way, but it was still hard to say goodbye to this huge gray brick. Before we jump in, let me know your favorite late Game Boy game in the comments below. And if you like Nintendo content like this, consider subscribing. We put out new videos every week. Here are the games that helped us say goodbye. The last days of the Game Boy.
Harvest Moon GB, released December 1997. It's Harvest Moon, but it's on the Game Boy. For anyone familiar with the farming sim genre, you're gonna feel right at home with Harvest Moon. You inherit a farm from your dead granddad, rest in peace, and basically the entire game is just restoring that farm. You're planting and watering crops, taking care of your animals, and then you're making a little bit of money when you sell that stuff. The sprites are nice and big. The pixel art is really nice too. I mean, you can actually tell what these barnyard things are. If you've never played a Harvest Moon game, and maybe the closest you've come is something like Stardew Valley, you're gonna feel right at home here. Stardew Valley was taking lots of inspiration from Harvest Moon. In fact, it was supposed to be like the antidote for what Harvest Moon eventually became as the generations went on and it got further and further away from this basic farming sim. Today, the Harvest Moon series is known as Story of Seasons, and it's just a little different. In many ways, Stardew Valley is the spiritual successor to Harvest Moon. If you really like Stardew and want to experience where it came from, Harvest Moon on the Game Boy is a great place to start. James Bond 007, released February 1998. James Bond 007 puts you in control of the world's most famous spy, obviously James Bond. I had no idea this game even existed. It's full of that 90s Pierce Brosnan Bond aesthetic. The dialogue is funny and quippy, the gadgets are cool, and it starts slow, but the longer you play it, the more fun the game gets. I have to say though, if you're expecting a high-energy action game like maybe another Nintendo-based 007 game you might be thinking about right now, you might be a little disappointed with this one. James Bond 007 is slow. Instead of blowing stuff up, you spend time talking to people and gathering intel, which I guess is what being a spy is all about, right? Some of the things you have to do are pretty lame though. So for example, in the first location, there's a bridge out and you have to find a guy's hammer so he'll fix the bridge and allow you to pass. A little while later, there's another fetch quest where you have to find a guy's missing machete so you can cut down bushes, Zelda style, and progress through the stage. The game's full of these little fetch quests. They don't feel like something James Bond would actually do, but whatever. The stages in this game are huge, and there's no map or anything to help you get around. This was probably the most frustrating part of the game for me. It's really easy to get lost, and lots of assets are reused, so it's hard to tell one screen from another. The missions themselves aren't too complicated. Find a thing, find another thing, find a third thing, then find a way out. The sprites are fun. I think Bond standing around with one hand in his pocket's kind of cool. It's got a little bit of attitude. There's several ways to attack enemies, and that keeps things interesting stage after stage. You can punch them, hack them with a machete, or shoot them with your sidearm. But with all that said, the combat isn't all that in-depth. And it really doesn't need to be. It's really secondary to gathering information and piecing together the story. The story can be a little hard to follow, especially if you miss an NPC or you forget to talk to the NPC multiple times to gather these little pieces of the plot that help you put together this broader story. Again, it's a Game Boy game. It's a Game Boy James Bond game. I'm not expecting huge plots here, so it's serviceable. It's fine. International Superstar Soccer, released June 1998. This series has had a lot of releases on a lot of different consoles. Before this video, I didn't realize that the series actually continued through the PlayStation 2 era with International Superstar Soccer 3. I don't remember International Superstar past the Game Boy. Did you guys play these games? Let me know in the comments. On handhelds though, there were several different International Superstar Soccer games, but this one was the first. So how's the gameplay? I mean, it's a soccer game. The gameplay is a lot like what you expect from a modern soccer game, just simplified to the extreme. Some of the issues I had with it though, you move very, very slowly. You have no control over how hard you're kicking or who you're passing to. There's no sense of how much time is left in the match, so sometimes halftime or the end of the game can sneak up on you. But with all that said, this is a fun little soccer game to play on the go. Small Soldiers, released September 1998. Small Soldiers the game is based on the 1998 movie of the same name, starring Tommy Lee Jones and Kirsten Dunst. If you were around back in 1998, you probably remember being absolutely bombarded by Small Soldiers. The movie was about a line of toys, the Gorgonites and the Commando Elite. In the movie, the toys became sentient and the Commando Elite just started raising hell. The movie had a ton of merchandise, including toys that looked just like the toys from the movie. Well, it's not a great movie, but it was a fun watch. It looked really visually interesting back in 1998. And I wish I could say the same about the Game Boy game. So in the game, you play as the Gorgonites leader, Archer, as he tries to escape Chip Hazard and the rest of the Commando Elite. Love that name. The controls aren't great, and your movement's pretty slow, and the platforming is pretty difficult. The levels don't offer a ton of variety. It's just another dull licensed game, but it's a blast from the past, so you might enjoy it. Anyway, I hope you find Gorgon, my friends. Pokemon Yellow, released September 1998. The first generation of Pokemon games breathed new life into the Game Boy. Red and Blue were released in 1996, 7 years after the Game Boy was introduced. Pokemon Yellow followed in 1998, becoming the generation's definitive version, the Special Pikachu Edition. Yellow fixed a lot of glitches and bugs from the earlier games, but it also updated pixel art for a lot of the monsters. It also changed the story a little bit to more closely follow the anime. Pokemon Yellow was the first game in the series that had a Pokemon actually follow you outside of the Pokeball, and that was a huge deal on the handheld. The other thing that Pokemon Yellow did that was so important was actually give us access to all 3 starters. Charmander, Squirtle, Bulbasaur, you could get them all in addition to Pikachu as you progress through the story. Pokemon Yellow isn't the way that I first experienced Pokemon, but I have to admit, it's probably the best. If you're gonna go back and play Gen 1 Pokemon on a Game Boy, Pokemon Yellow is the way to do it. Beavis and Butthead for the Game Boy. Released March 1999 in North America. Released in 1998 in Europe. Now, I love Beavis and Butthead. And in this house, Mike Judge is a saint. But this game just didn't do it for me. The game doesn't start off on a high note. I guess they couldn't get the licensing for Beavis and Butthead's actual Metallica and AC/DC t-shirts, so they just stuck them with these more generic ones. There are lots of different versions of this game. There's one for the Super Nintendo, the Mega Drive, and the Game Gear, and they were all released in 1994. The Game Boy version, though, came out much later in 1999. In the Game Boy version, the plot's a little different. Instead of trying to find torn-up GWAR concert tickets, the boys are trying to join Todd's gang. But instead, they get detention, and then they have to find a way to slip out of the school without getting caught. The first stage, you're avoiding teachers and trying to get around other students' desks and stuff. It's just not a very fun game. I never got very far in it either. I don't know, I really don't like it at all. But am I missing something here? Did you like this Beavis and Butthead game on the Game Boy? Let me know if I'm missing something here.
What were some of your favorite late Game Boy games? Let me know in the comments below. As always, thanks for watching, thanks for subscribing.